What does it take to become the world champion of public speaking? Hey everyone, my name is Wade Patterson, and I am your host for this, the second episode of Keys from Keynotes, and it was my absolute honor to speak with Mohammed Qahtani, who is the 2015 Toastmasters world champion of public speaking. And if you haven't seen Mohammed's speech, I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Ensure that you check out this speech because it is absolutely incredible. You'll watch it and have no question of why Mohammed won the competition that year. But we dive deeper than that in this conversation. We go back to Mohammed's childhood and the fact that he dealt with an incredible speech impediment at a very young age. And it was something he faced ridicule over, but he was challenged to face that fear head on. And so he talked about doing that and how it didn't go perfectly the first time, but his persistence, he kept doing it. He kept facing his fear until he overcame this challenge. And now look at him. 2009, he joins Toastmasters. By 2015, he is the world champion of public speaking. And then we talk about, well, how did he craft that world championship speech? What went into it? How did he use humor? What did his introduction look like? And why are introductions essential to powerful speeches? And then what was it like afterward? He wins this world championship title. Was there fame? Was there money? Mohammed's incredibly candid in this conversation. And then toward the end, we dive into a few other interesting subjects. Things like, what is the best thing about Toastmasters? And what is the worst thing about Toastmasters? I know you're going to love this, the second episode of Keys from Keynotes. Well, hi there and welcome to Keys from Keynotes. My name is Wade Patterson. Keys from Keynotes is an interview series that taps into the knowledge and expertise of some of the world's greatest public speakers. And on this episode, I'm joined by 2015 world champion of public speaking, Mohammed Qahtani. Born in a small Saudi Arabian village, Mohammed struggled with a speech impediment as a young boy. Speaking challenges were a common theme for Mohammed throughout his life. However, he was resilient and continued to face his fears. In 2009, he joined Toastmasters, and 6 years later, beat out more than 30,000 speakers to be crowned Toastmasters Best Speaker in the World. Mohammed, welcome to Keys from Keynotes.
Thank you so much for having me, sir.
As I mentioned there in the bio, I mean, this speech impediment, I want to start right from the beginning. For the benefit of our audience, do you mind kind of giving the full background and story behind that?
I have like a really vague kind of childhood memory, but I do remember when I was in first grade, a teacher walked into my class and he placed a book in front of me and asked me to read. And when I started reading, I was stuttering and he actually slapped me across the face.
Wow.
And this was back in the time where, stuttering is and speech impediment was not something that, mainstream. And he said, there is no hope out of you. You're done. And he took the book and he gave it to another student. And that one sentence that he said, there is no hope out of you, kind of stuck with me. I really thought that, I am worthless. And that was my childhood until my last year of high school. I avoided speaking to anybody. I go to school and come home and lock myself in my room. I spent all of my time just reading by myself because I truly believed what the teacher has said, that there's no hope out of me. I'm a lost cause. And in my last year of high school, I remember one day I was leaving the school and there was a tap on my shoulder. And when I looked over, it was one of the students in my class. I remember I took a piece of paper and a pen and I wrote, I cannot speak, on the paper. And he said, if you're mute, you will not be in this school. You will be for the special needs school. But since you're here, that means you can't speak. Your problem is you're afraid. If you want some help, I can help you. And I kind of, like out of my head. And he said, if you want to overcome any kind of fear, you have to face the ultimate form of that fear. And he told me that I should go to the principal and ask him to read the morning announcements, which is something that we used to do in every, in my school. Read the morning announcement in front of the entire school, 400 students. And because when you're desperate, when somebody throws you a lifeline, even if it doesn't make sense, you will just hang on to it. And that's why I took that idea. And the next morning, I went to the principal and I said, I want to read the morning. I want to read the morning announcement. He gave it to me, and I stood in front of 400 students, and I still remember it to this day. I started speaking and I stuttered, and everybody was laughing at me. And I felt so small, so insignificant. You know, the one thing that I tried to escape from my entire life, I voluntarily walked right into it. Why? Just because a guy gave me an advice. And I remember during recess, I went to him and I was really upset and really mad. And I said, is that what you wanted? Like, you wanted to humiliate me in front of the entire school? And he said, success doesn't happen from the first time. Go back and try again. And day after day, I kept on trying. And I don't know why I kept on trying, but every time I tried, I realized, like, I noticed that some of the words that I used to stutter the day before, I don't anymore. Which means he was right. This is really the cure. So that was really the first time I fell in love with speaking and being on stage.
So Mohammed, I think that outlines perfectly your attitude of resilience and just this willingness to continue and trying to get past these obstacles and get better and better. And it kind of ties into the idea of practicing speaking. So now obviously you are at this elite level as a speaker. What have you taken from that early childhood resilience when it comes to your current speeches with practicing? Is that something where you work and work and work until they get better? What does your practice routine look like for speeches?
Well, it's like anything in life. I think when you do it with passion, you excel in it. And for me, I really find out that my passion is being in front of an audience and speaking. And at the beginning, when I first started to join Toastmasters back in 2009, I wasn't really a good speaker, but I loved it. You know, like, I loved being on stage. I loved, sharing experiences and stories, making people laugh, and the more you do it, the more you become really excellent at it. So it's like anything else in life. The more you do it, the more that you excel at it. The problem is, a lot of people, sadly, they just lose the passion. You know, they do it once or twice, and they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna try something else. Or okay, it's like when you go into the gym and you see this man who's really puffed up and has all the muscles in the right places, and you're thinking, wow, I really want to have a body like that. But you don't ask yourself how many days and how many hours did this guy spend just to get to that shape. And he wouldn't get to that shape unless he like loved it, because nobody wants to go to the gym every single day and lift weights every single day. It's like horrendous. But don't expect results to happen in a day or a week or a month. Again, if you look at, you going to the gym, if you go there to lose weight, you might be there for like a day or two or three, and then you look yourself in the mirror and then you notice I don't see any change. I still look the same. A week goes by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and every day you look at the mirror and you're thinking, I don't see any change. Why? Because you don't see the small incremental changes happening day over day over day. But then somebody else might see you and say, "Yay, man, you look good." And that's when you think that, oh, I guess it's working. And anything that you do in a consistent base, no matter what it is, you will become an expert at it.
I love that. Such good advice. One of the things I know that you're passionate about, Mohammed, is comedy and injecting humor into your speech. And my understanding is that that even included some levels of stand-up comedy. How
Yeah.
did that experience strengthen the humor within your speeches?
So I started to do stand-up comedy when I was in college, and I had this kind of like I had this fear of people laughing at me because I used to be I used to stutter when I was young. So I turned the fear into like a motive. I thought to myself, if the audience are gonna laugh anyways, they might as well laugh with me and and not laugh at me. So I started to do comedy when I was in college, and I was really like I did really well when I did like open mic nights and so on. But when I started to do speeches, I thought to myself, what does the audience always love? The audience always love two things. They love to laugh and they love to hear stories. But you have to walk a thin line because you want to be motivational and inspirational, but also at the same time, you do not want to come out as a clown who, just make people laugh all the time. So I had this formula which I do in all my speeches where the first half of my speech is usually funny. There's a lot of humor and comedy in it, and the second half is, the deep stuff and the drama stuff, and I've always kept this formula throughout my entire speeches, it's been working. It's been working very well.
So I'm wondering why structured that way. So why is the funny part, the humor up front? Is there a reason for that? Is that part of the
Well,
strategy?
when it comes to speeches, a lot of people might think, or like a lot of coaches might say, "I'm going to teach you the secret recipe to a good speech." Let me tell you up front, there are no secret recipes. It's just a style that clicks with the audience. What I found works for me is to keep the humor at the beginning of the speech and to give the message and the deep stuff at the end of the speech. I've seen speakers who do it the other way around. For example, they start with the drama and then it's the light stuff at the end. I've seen speakers who make it like a mountain and a valley, so it's like a roller coaster of emotions. Like they make the audience laugh and then they cry and then they laugh again, whatever. So there are no secret formulas.
One of the things you do so well as well, Mohammed, talking about kind of having that humor up front, is your introductions. Your speech introductions are so powerful. So if we go back to that 2015 world champion speech, you're stood in front of the audience, you pull out a cigarette and a lighter, and you actually turn on the lighter and it looks like you're going to light the cigarette. And I think I heard a gasp from the audience at that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, you create this tension and then you look at them and you say, "What?" And then you lead into your intro, which has a lot of humor in that as well. You have these creative, powerful introductions. Why are powerful introductions important? And how do you go about crafting these introductions for your speeches?
So, uh, so, so if you ask yourself or ask anyone of the listeners how many presentations you've been through or how many speeches you've attended, a lot, hundreds, right? And if you go through all of them, you will notice that they all start the same way. Hi, my name is so and so, and today I'll be speaking about this and that. The same introduction that we all got used to. Problem with that is because you got used to it, your brain already skips. Before you even introduce who you are, you need to grab the attention of the audience first. It's like it's like when you go to YouTube right now. Like if you go to YouTube and you watch a clip, uh, once you click on it, the first thing that you see is an ad, and the ad will last for like 3 seconds or 5 seconds, and then gives you the option to skip. Now, let me ask you this question. Has there been an ad that you did not skip? And if the answer is yes, let me ask you this follow-up question. Why? And the reason is something happened in the first 5 seconds that made you think, huh, I want to see where this is going. So even though it was 5 seconds, but something happened in it that made you want to watch the rest of the ad. And the same thing with a speech. If you did not hook me from the first 5 seconds, my mind will automatically skip and start thinking about something else. So do something spectacular in the first few seconds of your speech that will grab the audience's attention.
One thing I'm wondering about, so you take on the World Championship of Public Speaking, obviously would have started at the club level and grown from there. What did you learn from that whole experience? Like, what was the biggest takeaway?
I remember when I first started competing back in 2010, and I won my club and I went to the area level. And when I got to the area level, I got second place. And when I got second place, I was crushed because I couldn't advance into the next stage. My club president at the time, he was passing by and he stopped by and he congratulated me on my speech and he said, everybody loved it. And I said, yeah, man, who cares? And he said, what's wrong? I said, dude, I got second place. And he said, so? I was like, man, just look how tiny this trophy is. I mean, like, it's so small. I mean, I can't even put this on my desk. And then he said something that really stuck with me. He said, Mohammed, if what you're looking for is a piece of glass, a trophy, I'll go now and I'll buy you one. I'll buy you the biggest one, if that's what you want. And that really like resonated with me because yes, everybody will be chasing after, I don't know, like a better job, a bigger raise, a trophy, a title, fame. But it isn't really what you're chasing after. All these things are just keys. Keys that will open you doors where you unlock or where you get a chance to influence more and more people. And from that day forward, every time I took the stage, whether I speak to thousands or even to 2 or 3 people, I always give it my all. Because in my mind, if I can only influence the life of one person, and that person can change the life of another person, and that other person will be changing the life of maybe 2 other people. And then it started like a ripple effect that I might actually be able to change the entire world just by the change of one person. You know, fame and money and all these stuff, it will come later. But first of all, did somebody out there learn something from you? I really hope they do.
Mohammed, each of your answers is like a well-structured, it's like a story within itself. It's such a treat listening to you talk about this. So for somebody who's thinking about, you know, maybe they're a Toastmasters member, they're trying to work up the courage to take on that speech. I mean, that alone is probably great motivation, but from like a tangible maybe strategy point of view for someone who's done it, who's won at the top level, what would you suggest? Just something to go in. I mean, obviously, it sounds like enjoy the process, you know, try to make an impact on the audience. But is there one kind of key thing that may help them succeed, especially at some of those early levels?
All right. So let me talk to you as a person who made it to the other side, a person who actually won the championship. I've actually had the pleasure of speaking to other world champions, and I've been coached by other world champions as well. Just let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as you might think it is.
Mhm.
Yes, within the Toastmaster fraternity, you are known, but outside, nobody knows who you are. I have met a lot of other world champions, and let me tell you, they're not rich. They're not as famous as you might think it is. So if it's not money and it's not fame, then why do you want to compete? Is it to win a trophy or a title? I remember in 2018, I was speaking in a district in New Zealand. And while I was there, I remember I asked the people at the Toastmasters district, I said, David Nottage, the 1999 world champion, is from New Zealand. And nobody knew who he was except this old man who said, "Oh yeah, he lives actually across the street." I was like, "Wait a minute. You brought me from across the world around while you had a world champion across the street?" And he said, "Yeah, but again, nobody remember who he is. So even if you win today, in a few years, nobody will even know who you are." So let me ask you this question again. Why do you want to compete? I'll tell you why. If you ever make it, and I hope that you do, you will be speaking in front of thousands of people with thousands more watching you online. And this is your chance to give a message to the entire world. Now, whether you win or lose, that's a different story. And I really hope that you don't focus on that. But Toastmaster gave you a chance and the platform to speak to thousands of people. What would you say? And how would you make the world a better place in 5 to 7 minutes?
I love that perspective. And speaking of 5 to 7 minutes, I think it's interesting, right? Because you perfected the speech and you had that powerful message. You took your moment to actually deliver something that was meaningful to you. And of course, yes, you won at the highest level. But then I would imagine, sure, in the distance, kind of the fame rides away, that kind of thing. But I would imagine that at that moment, there was probably a lot of interest. People hear, oh, wow, Muhammad is the world champion. You get this opportunities. However, when people ask you to speak for maybe a conference or an event, it's probably not for 5 to 7 minutes. And so for you, somebody who joined Toastmasters in 2009, what was that like then sort of needing to maybe build a bigger speech? Did you inject parts of that award-winning speech that had drawn people in initially? What did that look like? And because I'm assuming you were
So,
asked to give speeches after that.
yeah. Well, the funny thing is, until I won the world championship, I've never given a speech longer than 7 minutes. I
Wow.
only did, yeah, I only did club contests and area contests and division contests. I've never done anything more than 10 minutes maximum. But after I won, as you said, like I started to get these invites and people want me to give some keynotes. And, we talk about 30 minutes, or 40 minutes, and an hour, which is something that I've never done before. Now, I gave a promise to myself. The speech, which is the power of words, which I won, I promised myself I would never give that speech ever again. And since the day that I won, I have kept this promise to this day. I have never given that speech ever again. I thought to myself, I do not want to be known just for one thing that I did in the past and just repeating it over and over again. Throw it away, let's start fresh. And the biggest learning that I had actually happens after I won. I had to actually learn how to engage an audience for a longer time, like 30 minutes and 40 minutes and an hour. It's easy to keep an audience engaged for 5 minutes. It's extremely hard to do it for like an hour. So the biggest learning opportunity that I had actually happened before I won, because I had to learn how to become a keynote speaker and not just a 5 minutes speech kind of guy.
That's so admirable to take this speech that is tried, tested, and true. It's successful. Sometimes I think as speakers, I'm guilty of this for sure, but you have something that clicks and it's that low hanging fruit to want to always include it in part of future speeches because you know you'll probably get the audience to laugh, if whether it's a story or something like that. So that's one thing I'm taking away from this conversation right there is the need to kind of separate it sometimes and continue to grow and come up with something new. Mohammed, I'm curious nowadays, you step in front of the audience. Do you get nervous beforehand?
I always do. I always get nervous whether I'm speaking to 10 or 12 people or speaking to thousands. The feeling is still there. The shivering, the fast heartbeats, the fast breaths. But I always tell myself, and I always remind my audience when I do like public speaking, courses, is fear will always be with you. But it's like skydiving. Imagine you are in an airplane with a parachute and you're standing at the edge and you're looking at this really steep drop. Are you afraid? Of course you are. But the choice is yours. You could say, nope, no way, I'm not going to jump. Or you could say, ah, and then you let yourself go. Fear will always there. Fear will always be there. But the choice is yours. Do you want it to be an obstacle or do you want it to be a motive?
In terms of when you're about to deliver a speech, you have that nervousness. Do you have a routine? I know I'm getting like really tactical here, but I'm so curious to hear from your perspective. But do you have a routine? Like, is there a song you
Yeah.
listen to pump you up? Is there, do you meditate? Like, what does that look like in preparation before you take the stage?
So, two things I always do before I take the stage is I will always take really deep breaths before I take the stage. I do them so much to the point that I start to feel kind of like lightheaded, and I think that actually helps me with my like nervousness. The other thing that I do is I always remind myself, and again, this is not me being egotistical or whatever, but I always remind myself, you have something that everybody in the audience are waiting to listen.
Hmm.
You have something that they need. They need you more than you need them. And when I keep telling myself this, you take the stage, you feel like you are the rock star, of a concert.
Earlier, you talked about delivering a presentation for Toastmasters in New Zealand. I know that you studied in Arizona. You're from Saudi Arabia. Have you noticed in different parts of the world that audiences react different or that you need to almost do something different for, these global audiences in various places?
Well, like I've noticed that like sometimes you have to kind of tailor your talk in a way that will fit the audience. I always try myself to pick topics that's kind of like universal, that it will click with people from the west, from the east, from the far east, or whatever. But what I also noticed that because I've been blessed and honored to be traveling all over the world and speaking all over the world, but I've noticed that people everywhere are exactly the same.
Hmm.
They want peaceful life. They care for each other. They want a much better world. Now, their interpretation of what much better world is might be like different from each other, but deep down, we all want the same thing. And I've always learned that whatever stereotype that you have about anywhere else in the world, I'm telling you right now, we are all the same. Whether you are from the US, Canada, from Europe, Africa, India, Far East, Russia, whatever you are, we all want the same thing. We want peace. We want everybody to get along. We might have a different interpretation what that might look like, but deep down, we do not hate people for no reason.
There's been so much value, Mohammed, packed into this episode. In a second, I'm going to ask you the three questions, kind of three rapid fire questions that I ask every single guest of the podcast. But before that, I'm going to ask you maybe a bit of a challenging question. What's the
Sure.
best thing and what's the worst thing about Toastmasters?
Okay, the best thing about Toastmaster is it improves your like self-confidence, not just as a speaker, in everywhere, as a leader, as a communicator, and it will make you think that there's nothing that you cannot do. You'll start to feel like I can really accomplish anything. The worst thing about Toastmaster, in my own opinion, is the sugarcoating. A lot of new like members when they join in, and the older members they just want to encourage them. So even if they're not really good, they will try to sugarcoat the evaluation and make it sound, oh no, you did great, whatever. I really hope that I can get an honest evaluation rather than a sugarcoated one.
Well said. Well said. I love that. So these final three questions that I'm going to ask every guest Keys for Keynotes. Question number one, who is your personal favorite keynote speaker?
My personal and hands down speaker, like my favorite is like Dhananjay Hitachi, who is the 2014 world champion. Now I've seen his speech on YouTube. I see something in you, but again, that's a 5 minute speech. But then I got a chance to see him give a 30 minute keynote, and that is my role model when it comes to speaking. And I always admire to be at least half as good as he is.
I love that answer. Question number two, what is your most embarrassing speaking moment?
My best or my most embarrassing moment is I was giving a keynote in Australia. And in my keynote, I was telling a story and I used the phrase, I was pissed. Now, if you are from the US or Canada or whatever, being pissed means, I'm angry.
Yeah.
In Australia, it has a different meaning.
Yeah.
Being pissed means like, you go to the bathroom and you're like, peeing. So when I was speaking, when I was done, people were like, why are you always going to the bathroom? I was like, what? Like I wasn't going to the bathroom. So it was kind of like an embarrassing moment.
Oh, that's a good one. And then final question for you, Mohammed. If you could speak at any venue in the world, where would it be?
The one place that I still haven't spoken at, and I really would love to speak to is like New York. I think New York is one of the most amazing places in terms of culture. It has a lot of amazing like theaters, and I really wish that one day I would get a chance to speak in New York City.
Mohammed, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Keys from Keynotes.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.